We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Beis Amud Aleph and Meseches Shevuos. This is Shevuos Daf 32a. On the previous Amud, Shmuel said that when it comes to Shevuos or Edus, the litigant has to actually ask the Eidim to testify in his behalf, and then they have to deny it, and they take a Shevuah, and again, they're lying in that situation. That's when it's a case of Shevuos or Edus that they are liable to bring a carbon. And so Shmuel said that the litigant has to actually ask them directly to testify in his behalf. But let's say, for example, he's just running after them, and they realize why he's running after them, and then they simply say that we don't know any testimony for you, and they take the Shevuah. So then that's not a case of Shevuos Edus. And the Gemara asked that in the Mishnah coming up, it actually already says that explicitly. And the Mishnah over there continues, Ad sheyishmu mipi hatovea. They actually have to hear from the tovea, from the one making the claim. Rashi says, Ad sheyishmu mipi hatovea bo v'hayiduni. They have to hear him say, come and testify for me. So again, that's a Mishnah. What exactly is Shmuel teaching? And the Gemara continues and answers, Ratz acharei and itzrichale. What he's teaching is, even in a situation where the tovea is running after them, that's the chiddush of Shmuel. Because one might have thought, Kaven de Ratz acharein, since he's running after them, Kiman into Amar Lahu Dami. It's as if he said to them that I want you to testify for me. So Kamash Malon, so that's what Shmuel is saying, that running after them is not the equivalent of actually saying it. The person, the tovea, has to actually say, Bo v'hayiduni. But the Gemara still says, V'hanami tanina, but that also is in the Mishnah, because it says, Shevuos Edus Keitzad. How does Shevuos Edus work? Amar le'edim bo v'hayiduni, Shavua v'chulu, if he says to the witnesses, testify for me. So Amar in lo, Amar lo. So the Mishnah is saying he has to actually say that to them, and if he doesn't say that to them, then it doesn't apply. And the Gemara says not necessarily. Amar lav dafka. One could say that Amar is lav dafka. It doesn't actually mean he has to say it. It just means he has to indicate, even if it's not verbal. The ilote mahachin. If you don't say this, gabe pikadon, by Shevuos HaPikadon, we have a similar language in the Mishnah, and over there it is certainly lav dafka. The katani, because it says over there Shevuos HaPikadon keitzad. It says how does Shevuos HaPikadon work? Amar lo. He says to the person, Tainli pikadon sheyesh li biyadcha. He says to him, give me the deposit that you have, it's mine. Hachinami Amar in lo Amar lo. Do you think over there that there's a halacha that the person has to actually say that to the person who has the pikadon? Lo Amar lo, it doesn't apply if he doesn't say? That's not true. Havekichesh ba'miso kaldu. It says he has to deny it. Any kind of denial. There doesn't have to be a direct statement from the owner to the person who has the pikadon. Elo Amar lav dafka. So you have to say in that Mishnah that Amar is lav dafka. It doesn't actually mean that he says it to him. It just means that's one of the cases. Hachanami lav dafka. So too by Shevuos Edus, maybe he doesn't have to actually say it to them. But the Gemara says, no, hi mai, what do you mean to say over here that it's all lav dafka? If you said that the Amar over here is dafka, that the tovea actually has to say that to the Eidim, so Tana Hasam Atu Hacha, then at least the next Mishnah about Shevuos HaPikadon would make sense. Over there, the reason why it says, in the later Mishnah rather of Shevuos HaPikadon, the reason why it says Amar is because it says it over here, so we just use the same language. Lo Amar de Hasam dafka v'lo Amar de Hacha dafka, but if you're going to say the Amar over there is not dafka, the Amar over here is not dafka, so Amar lamali lemisni. So what do you have to say Amar for in all these Mishnayos? If it's not a requirement, why does the Mishnah keep mentioning that? And the Gemara says, well, that's not necessarily a proof either. Dilma orcha de milsa kamash malan. Maybe that's just the general way that these cases evolve, but it's not a requirement, and so there is no real proof from the Mishnah, and that's why Shmuel needed to say what he has to say. And the Gemara continues, Tanya Kavase the Shmuel, we have a brisa that supports Shmuel. Ra'u shaba acharei, and they see that he's coming after them. Amru lo, they say to him, Ma'ata ba achareinu, why are you coming after us? Shavua she'einanu yodim lach edus, we're going to take an oath, we don't know any testimony. Peturin, so in that case they are exempt. The reason they're exempt is because he didn't actually say anything to them. Vim bipikadon, but by Shevuos HaPikadon chayavim, they would be liable because there is no such requirement that he says something to the person. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. The Mishnah said, Hishbiya alein chamisha pa'amim v'chulu. It said, let's say the person, he makes them take an oath 5 times outside of court. Again, this is the witnesses taking the oath that they don't know any testimony. And then in the court, they actually deny it. So they're actually going to be liable 5 times. But if it happens in reverse, let's say they take the Shevuos in the court 5 times. So then in the end, the liability is just going to be one liability. And the Gemara says, Minolan, from where do we know that when it comes to the denial is in the court, but if the denial is outside of the court, they're not liable. How do we know that? Amar Abaye says Amar Krutz, because the pasuk says Imlo Yagid V'Nosa Avono. It says if he doesn't testify, then he's going to carry the burden of his sin. Lo Amarti Lach Ela B'Makom. So this halacha only applies in a place She'ilu Magid, where if he were to testify, She'ilu Magid Zeh, where if this person were to testify, Mischayev Zeh Mamun, then this person would be liable to pay money which is in court. In and therefore you see that the denial takes place in court. Amar le Rav Papa li Abaye, Rav Papa said to Abaye, Yochi, if so, ema Shavua gufa, bebezdin in v'shalo bebezdin lo. If that's true, why not say the same thing about the oath? Let that be in court and not be outside of court. And the Gemara says to that, lo sal kadaitach, don't let that enter your mind. The Tanya, because we learned in a brisa, la'achas, as Rashi mentioned on the previous summer, the word la'achas is l'chayev al kol achas v'achas. The person is actually chayev on every single shvua. V'sal kadaitach bebezdin. Now, if you think those shvuos were taken in court, mi mechayev al kol achas v'achas, would the person really be liable for each one? And this Rashi explained on the previous summer that it's specifically when the shvuos are done outside of court, and then the denial is in court, that you're liable every single time. But if the shvuos were in courts, then there would actually only be one liability. And the Gemara quotes the Mishnah on the previous Amud. V'hatanan, we learned in the Mishnah, he should be alein chamisha pa'amim bifnei bezin. If he administers the oath to them 5 times in court, the kafru, when they deny it, ein chayavin ela achas. In that case, they're only going to be liable to one. Amar Rabbi Shimon says, Matam, what's the reason for this? Hoel ve'enam yecholin lachzor lahodos. There's a rule of kevan shehigid shovei nochozer umagid. Once you testify in court, you can't retestify and change your testimony, and that's what Rabbi Shimon means. What's the reason? Since if they wanted to retract and admit, they wouldn't be able to. Elalav shma minor. Rather, don't we see from here that shavua chutz lebezin, that the case of the Mishnah is specifically when they take the oath outside of court, and kfira bebezin, the denial is what's taking place in Bezdin. And the Gemara continues at the 2 dots. The Mishnah said, Kafru shnehen ka'achas chayav. And if they both, let's say 2 witnesses, they both deny knowing testimony at the same time, then they are both liable. And the idea in the Mishnah is that, let's say it wouldn't be at the same time. Let's say one aide would deny first, and then the other aide would deny. So only the first aide is going to be liable, because the second aide, the second witness, he is not critical any longer. Even if he testifies, one aide cannot be mechayiv anything. So therefore, it's only the first one. But if they both deny at the same time, since they both did it at the same time, they are both going to be liable. The Gemara asks, but it's impossible to be so exact. How exactly does this take place at the same time? Amar Rav Chisda says, Hamani Rabbi Yossi Aglili. This, who is the author of our Mishnah? It's Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Do Amar Efshar Letzamtzim. He says it's possible to be so precise. Rabbi Yochanan says, Afilo Temer Rabbanan. You don't have to say that the Mishnah is like Rabbi Yossi Aglili. You could even say it follows the Rabbanan. Kegon Shekafru Shneyen Besoch Kedei Dibor, because they both deny Toch Kedei Dibor, within Toch Kedei Dibor, the amount of time to say Shalom, and so therefore it all essentially happened at the same time. V'Toch Kedei Dibor Kedibor Dami. The rule is that if something happens within a few seconds, Toch Kedei Dibor, that's considered all at the same time, at the same moment that the speech took place. The Gemara questions this. Amar le Rav Acha mi Difti le Ravina. Rav Acha from Difti said to Ravina, Mechti, let us see. Toch Kedei Dibor kama hava. How much is Toch Kedei Dibor? It's Kedei she'elas Talmud l'Rav. It's the amount of time that a student asks his Rebbe and says Shalom to his Rebbe. We'll read the parentheses. Iko de Amri Kedei she'elas harav l'Talmud. Some say it's the amount of time that the Rebbe speaks and says Shalom to the student. So the point over here is as follows. Ad da Amri Shvuah she'einanu yodin l'cha edus tuva have. Until the person says a Shvuah that we don't know testimony, that's much more than Toch Kedei Dibor. How does all of this happen in Toch Kedei Dibor? Amar Lei said to him, Kol echad v'echad Toch Diburo shel chaver. We don't mean that the entire statement takes place within a few seconds. We mean that one makes his statement, one of the witnesses, and then within a few seconds, the other one makes the statement, starts his statement. That's considered all at the same time. And the Gemara continues at the 2 dots. The Mishnah said, again, if one witness denies it and takes the Shevuot, and then the second one does it, so the first one, his testimony was critical, and the fact that he's trying to get out of testifying, that was critical, because otherwise he could have been mechayev the defendant money. So he's going to be liable for Shavuos ha'edus. But the second one, he no longer is decisive, and so therefore he's exempt. The Gemara says, Masnisan delo ki haitana detanya. Our Mishnah does not seem to follow the author of the following brisa. It says in the brisa, Mashbia Eid Echad Pater, in a situation where Mashbia Eid Echad, where one witness is administered the oath, then we say exempt. For Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon Mechayev, and Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon says Chayev in that situation. And it seems to be that Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon is saying even one aid is considered decisive and therefore liable, and that should be true over here as well. It seems like our Mishnah is not like Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon. The Gemara says Lema b'hakam iflagi. Let us suggest this is exactly the machlokas. Demar savar Eid Echad kiyasa l'shvu hu dekasa. One says that one one witness can only really make someone take a shvuah. It's not really monetary, and therefore he's not considered decisive testimony, and he's not liable with regards to Shevuos Eidus. Umar Savar, and the other one holds Eid Echad Ki Asa Lemamona Ka'asa, that one witness is really coming for money as well. The Gemara says, V'tizbar, is that logical? Ha'amar Abaya, but didn't Abaya say, Hakol Modim Be'eid Sota? This next line of Abaya will be explained as it goes on. He says, everybody admits by the witness by Sota. V'hakol Modim Be'eidei Sota, everybody admits by witnesses by the Sota. Umachlokas Be'eidei Sota, and there's also machlokas by witnesses by the Sota. Hakol Modim Be'eid Echad, this is the critical line, everybody admits by Eid Echad. V'hakol Modim Be'eid Shekenegdo Chashad Al Hashvu, and also everybody admits by a case of a witness where the corresponding person is suspect from taking a shvuah, and in any case, the point over here is Hakol Modim Be'eid Echad, everybody agrees by Eid Echad. It seems there's not a machlokas by Eid Echad. And so the Gemara says, Ella rather, Dekuli Alma Eid Echad Kiyasi L'Shavua Ka'asi, rather everybody agrees one witness is coming for an oath. It's not coming to be mechayiv money. V'hacha b'haka miflagi, but here what are they arguing about? Mar Savar Davar Hagorim L'Mamon K'Mamon Dami, one holds that something that causes a person to have to pay money is considered like money. What that means is sometimes a person doesn't want to take a shvuah. The one witness would obligate him to take a shvuah. He doesn't want to. He would have to pay money, so it is relevant to mammon. It's considered monetary. Umar Savar, and the other one holds lav k'mamon dami. It's not considered monetary. And Rashi explains, V'tizbara de mechayiv Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon mammon al pi Eid Echad. Does it really make sense to say that Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon says that a person can be chayiv to pay money based on the testimony of just one witness? V'tayim misham hachiyu, and that's the reason that Rebbe Shimon says liable in that situation. V'hamar Abaya, but doesn't Abaya say hakol modim be'eid sota v'hakol modim be'eidei sota? Again, various cases where everyone admits. And Rashi explains, Umefarish lo l'kamon hachi. All of this will be explained later on as follows. Yesh edus besota shehakol modim ba shehamashbia eid echad chayiv. There is a case of testimony by sota where everybody admits that if somebody administers the Shevuot to one aid, that there actually would be a liability in terms of Shevuos Eidus. V'yesh Eidus besota, and then there's another testimony by sota, she'af im hishbia shneyan, that even if a person was mashbia both witnesses, the kafru, and they deny it, petur, and they're going to be exempt in terms of Shevuos Eidus. Umachlokas be'edei sota, there's also a case where there's a machlokas be'edei sota, yesh Eidus besota shenechliku ba chachamim Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon, there's a case by sota where the chachamim and Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon would disagree, b'mashbia as shneyan, again in a case where you administer a Shevuot to both of them, the kafru, and they deny that they know any testimony, b'machlukas and shenechliku b'mashbia eid echad demamon. It would be the same machlokas, the same reasoning in the machlokas in the case again where you administer the oath to one aid by a case by a monetary case. Umiperusha demilsa de Abaya lekamon shaminan, and from the explanation of what Abaya says later on, we're going to understand the time of the Rebbe Elazar mishum de kasavar, that the reason of Rebbe Elazar is because he holds davar hagorim lemamon kimamon dami, something that causes money, an obligation of money, is considered like money. Ve'eid echad gorim lemamon, and what Rebbe Elazar Rebbe Shimon is essentially saying is that an eid echad is considered gorim lemamon. An eid echad is mechayiv a shvuah, but it's gorim lemamon because if the person does not want to take a shvuah, then he's going to have to pay money. She'ilu heyed hayem mechayivo shvuah. Again, if he would have testified, this is a case of Shevuos Eidus where he's denying that he knows testimony, but had he testified, he would have obligated the person to take a shvuah. V'rov b'nei adam ein nishboin l'sheker v'hayem mishalim, and most people are not going to take a false shvuah, and then therefore the individual would pay. And the Gemara continues, Gufa, returning to what we said above. The Gemara will now analyze Abaya's statement. Amar Abaya said, Hakol modim be'eid sota, everybody admits by eid sota, Hakol modim be'eidei sota, and everybody admits by eidei sota. Again, everybody admits that there's a liability in terms of Shevuos Eidus. We'll see in a moment as the Gemara analyzes it. Umachlokas be'eidei sota, there's also a machlokas by the two eidim by sota. Hakol modim be'eid echad, everybody admits by one aid. Hakol modim be'eid shekenegdo chashad al hashvu. And also everybody admits by a witness, let's say the corresponding, the opposite one, the Gemara will discuss that as well. Let's say he's suspect and he cannot take a shvuah. And the Gemara now explains each line of Abaya. Hakol modim be'eid sota shechayev. Everybody admits by the single aid by sota that there's a liability in terms of Shevuos Eidus. That's be'eid tumah. That's referring to the aid tumah. Rashi is going to explain the sequence of events by sota, but the aid tumah is the final testimony that we rely on one aid to say that she actually committed the adultery, and she loses her ksuba. There's a monetary obligation based on just one aid, and so therefore if that one aid were to deny knowing testimony and he was lying about it, he took a shvu and he was lying about it, he would be liable in terms of Shevuos Eidus. Because the Torah actually believes one aid in terms of tumah. As it's written in the pasuk, ve'aid ein ba, it says there's no witness, kol sheyesh ba, meaning as long as you have even one witness, so that would count, that would be something that's relevant. Rashi explains, be'aid tumah, im hevi shnei eidei kinoi shehisra ba. Again, the case over here is, there's going to essentially be three sets of witnesses that are brought by Sota. First, you have two witnesses, they testify that he warned her, al tistri and ploni, that she shouldn't go into seclusion with so-and-so. Ushnei eidei stira, then there are two witnesses that actually are eidei stira, they actually see her going into seclusion, shenistra imo acharechen, that after the warning, she went into seclusion with this individual. V'yesh eid echad shenitmes b'stirazu, and then there's one witness that says she was actually defiled when she went into seclusion, meaning there was adultery. V'yishbia habalas o eid lohaid, and the husband administers an oath to this eid echad, this aid tumah, that he should testify. V'yifter michsubasa, and then he would actually be exempt from paying the ksuba, because the halacha is that if the one aid says she actually committed adultery, then she does not actually drink from the waters of the sota. He is simply exempt from paying her ksuba. The kafar edu, so if he denies that he knows that testimony, and again he's lying, so chayiv, if he takes a shvuah and again it's a lie, he's going to be liable. He's going to have to pay. He's going to be liable for a carbon for shvuah sa'edus to hamafsido maman mamish, because now he really made the person, the husband, lose out money. Had he testified, the husband would not have to pay the ksuba. Now that he did not testify, so there might be a liability that the husband has to pay the ksuba. That's a monetary obligation, and so therefore by aid tumah, that's what the Gemara means to say, by aid tumah, since the Torah believes the aid tumah, that now the husband doesn't have to pay the ksuba, so therefore that is a decisive kind of testimony, and there is Shevuos Eidus over there. Because the Torah actually trusts that one aid. Kedamar b'Meseches Sota, like it says in Meseches Sota, v'im heyed hayapotro miksubasa. Again, had he testified, then the husband would be exempt from paying the ksuba. V'hoel v'kafar eidu so chayv. So since he denied that he knew testimony, so now he's going to be liable in terms of Shevuos Eidus. As the pasuk says, ve'eid ein ba v'darshinam b'Meseches Sota. We darshan that pasuk in Meseches Sota. Kol makom shenemar eid shnayim kamar. Anytime the pasuk says aid, it really means two witnesses. Unless the Torah specifies that it's one. It says there's no witness. We understand that actually means trey, that there are not two witnesses, elochad, but there is one witness, v'hilo nitpasa asura, and then it goes on to say that it's a situation where she's forbidden. If the phrase of the pasuk is v'hilo nisbasa, that means that it was not a situation where she was coerced. Obviously we're being strict on her, and we're coming to say that she is forbidden, and so therefore again you see that just one aid, we believe one aid when it comes to the aid tumah. And the Gemara continues explaining the next line of Abaye, v'hakol modim be'edei sota shapater. It said that everybody admits by the two witnesses by sota that they are exempt in terms of Shevuos Eidus. That's be'edei kinoi. That's talking about the witnesses that were there when the husband warned the wife not to go into seclusion with that person. To have a gorim de gorim. The reason for that is that's not even gorim l'mammon. That's actually gorim de gorim. That's twice removed from money, and so everybody agrees that has nothing to do with a monetary obligation, and therefore is not liable in terms of Shevuos Eidus. And Rashi explains, "V'hakol modim be'edei sota." Everybody admits by edei sota. Sha'afilu hishbi ashneim. Even if he administers the oath to both of the witnesses, the kafir when they deny it, again they're lying. So patur, and they're exempt in terms of Shevuos Eidus. Be'edei kinoi degorim degorim. Well, that's talking about the witnesses of warning, because that's a double removed of causation. Afim had nucha. Even if they had testified, adayin atotzarach le'edei stira. Even if we testified for you, you still need edei stira. Uchashiyavo edei stira, and even when the Eidei Stira come, even they are not creating an obligation that makes her lose out, meaning to lose the ksuba. They're just causing that now she's going to have to drink the bitter waters. And maybe if she'll be afraid of the water, she admits that she was defiled, she'll admit that she committed adultery, and so then she will lose the ksuba. So you're two steps removed in terms of her losing the ksuba, and therefore when it comes to the Eidei Kinoi, if they deny that they know testimony, there is still certainly no liability in terms of Shevuos Eidus, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Beis Amud Beis.